Okay, I'm gonna need you guys to lock in. Today's story, very, in capital letters, VERY, very graphic, very disturbing, very gruesome. Believe me when I say it's bad, and believe me when I say that if you have a weak stomach, you should skip this video. On September 20th in 2015 at 3:39 in the morning, authorities in Sunrise, Florida received a frantic 911 call. The caller was a man and he was losing his mind, screaming, crying into the phone, saying that his girlfriend was having trouble breathing and that she needed help immediately. The dispatcher could hardly understand what he was saying, but it was clear that he was in a panic. He was worried that his girlfriend wasn't going to make it. He kept saying that he didn't know what happened, saying, "Come on, please, baby, please, come on, please." Police officers and paramedics were dispatched to the apartment complex. When they arrived, they walked into the apartment, which was pretty dark. The air felt thick. They didn't know what they were walking into. But not even in their worst nightmares could they have imagined just how gruesome and disturbing the crime scene would be. Red everywhere, on the walls, on the doors, on the floors, but it was textured almost. It looked like there were little pieces of something else mixed in it, and there were also pieces of that texture scattered around the apartment building, leaving behind a trail leading into the bathroom. They also immediately noticed that some of the doors looked like they had been ripped off the hinges. Those little pieces were pieces of human tissue, and inside of that bathroom were two people, a man on the floor crying, and in his arms the body of a deceased woman. 34-year-old Maria Nemeth was born in Peru. When she was a teenager, she moved to Miami, which is when she learned how to speak English. She was a very happy, outdoorsy, friendly kind of person, and her favorite thing in the world was taking pictures. Something about being able to capture a moment and freeze it in time was amusing to her. By 2014, she was in her 30s now, living in Florida, working at an apartment complex, and single, but ready to mingle. Maria was cautious about dating, not only because she was in her 30s now looking for a serious relationship, but also because she had previously been in an 8-year-long marriage. She got married when she was only 22 years old, but fast forward 8 years, she decided it wasn't what she wanted anymore, so they got a divorce and went their separate ways. One night, when she was out with her friends, Maria ran into and met a guy that caught her eye, 24-year-old Fidel Lopez. A little bit younger than her, but very, very handsome in her eyes. Like her, Fidel wasn't from the States. He was born in Cuba and he moved to the US with his father when he was 16 years old. The more the two of them chatted, the more they realized that they had in common. Fidel had also been previously married, now divorced, but the two of them had 2 kids together. He actually still lived with his ex-wife and their 2 kids. So they meet, they're talking, they're vibing, they hit it off, they start dating. Maria then ends up moving in with Fidel, his ex-wife, and their kids. Could literally never be me, but it worked for them somehow. However, obviously that was not the ideal living situation. So about a year into their relationship, Maria and Fidel get their own place. They start renting an apartment in the apartment complex where Maria worked, but only a week after they moved in, that 911 call would be made by Fidel himself. Once officers were inside of the apartment, inside of that bathroom, looking straight at him, who was in tears, completely out of it, sitting on the floor, holding Maria in his arms, they knew as soon as they saw her that it was too late. She was gone. And at 4:02 in the morning, Maria Nemeth was pronounced deceased at the scene. And because of the state the apartment was in, it wasn't even a question to authorities that something terrible had happened and that more than likely Fidel was the one responsible. He was arrested and taken to the station to be questioned. It was around 7:30 in the morning now, and he was surprisingly willing to talk about what happened the night prior, kind of. So let's talk through the events of September 19th and what Fidel said happened. After work that day, him and Maria cooked dinner. They then headed over to Fidel's mom's house. They were there for a little bit. Afterwards, they went to Chili's, hung out there before returning back to their apartment. They had just moved in, so there were still boxes everywhere. They didn't really have any furniture, but they were in the mood to celebrate, so they grabbed a beverage that you have to be 21 years old to have, and they had a lot of them. Music was playing, they were having fun, all was good until they got into a really heated argument. After that, they start kissing, smooching, but they're still kind of angry, so they're being pretty aggressive. Fidel is being pretty controlling, pretty rough, and they engage in intimate activity. They do the deed, and afterwards, Fidel tells authorities that Maria got sick, so she went to the bathroom and he stepped outside on the balcony. And he said that when he came back inside, Maria was having trouble breathing. So, a lot of gaps and inconsistencies in his story, because what do you mean she was totally fine? You were doing whatever, you stepped outside, you came back in, you found her deceased. That doesn't just happen. The 2 officers talking to Fidel are trying out different strategies. They're playing good cop, bad cop. They're trying to be patient and understanding, saying, we know you're not a bad guy. We know you didn't mean to do this. Something just went wrong. And you need to tell us what it was. And he just keeps saying, I don't know, I wouldn't hurt her. And I can assume that this went on for hours and they're trying to tell him, dude, look, something happened. You did something awful to her. She's gone. You're going to jail, but if you tell us what happened, you might be able to get a lesser sentence for being cooperative, and you'll look like a human being who lost his temper, because Fidel did let them know that he had anger issues. He was one to lose his temper and start punching walls and flipping furniture around when he got angry. So they tell him, we need a why. We need an explanation as to what made you so angry that made you capable of hurting another human being to that degree. And they say, if you don't give us a why, if you don't give us a motive, then you are going to be looked at as an animal. Because the things that you did to her, to your girlfriend, the person that you claim to love, were animalistic. They were that bad. I mean, the crime scene literally looked as if a vicious, wild animal went in there and destroyed the entire place. Some of the neighbors said that even though it was the middle of the night, they thought that there was construction going on above them because the noises were that loud. But Fidel was not willing to tell them anything. He said that he was being cooperative with police, but that he just could not remember. But they were not going to let him go, because while he was being questioned, another group of law enforcement officials were at the crime scene investigating it, gathering evidence, and the picture that the crime scene painted of what could have happened was brutal. The officers that were talking to him got pictures of the crime scene eventually, and they showed those to Fidel as another attempt to try and get him to talk. They also later got autopsy results back. And if you're eating, this might be a good time to stop, because the things that Fidel did to Maria are truly unspeakable. Maria had blunt force trauma to her head, bruises covering her entire body, and a lot of defensive wounds that showed that she put up a fight. While they were engaging in intimate activities, at some point, Fidel grabbed foreign objects and inserted them in places, both front and back. Specifically a glass bottle, as well as a hair straightener, and his arm all the way up to his elbow. Maria had injuries similar to injuries that women sustain during childbirth. She had a 3.5-inch wound from her front to her back. And remember the chunks of human tissue that we mentioned earlier in the video that were scattered around the apartment? Those were parts of her organs. She had missing pieces of her insides that were ripped out. One of the pieces found in a different part of the apartment was 13 inches long. Maria had a total of 60 inches of her insides that had been removed from both her front and back ends. Those were the injuries that officers were describing to Fidel, and he was still able to sit there in front of them, look them in the eye, and say, I didn't do anything wrong. I only did what she asked me to do. They tell him, she did not ask you to do that. She would not have been able to talk or walk or move from the pain that she would have been in. Eventually, after hours and a million different stories, Fidel finally confessed, and he told them what really happened. Fidel told them that while they were being intimate, Maria called him by her ex-husband's name twice. And when she did, he saw red. He flew into a rage and started destroying the apartment, breaking glass doors, ripping the doors off the hinges, putting holes in the wall. He said, quote, she changed my name. She called me the name of the other guy, and she said it twice, and she was wrong, and she was confusing me with him. At that point, I got mad. I got really, really mad, end quote. After trashing the apartment, he returned to Maria and, quote, became a monster, end quote. He inserted those objects, and using his arm, he pulled out her insides. He said, quote, I wasn't thinking, man. I wasn't thinking, end quote. At 1:36 p.m., 10 hours after that 911 call was first made, Fidel was finally arrested and charged with Maria's death. And do you want to know another part of this story that makes me sick and that I cannot comprehend? His family, after learning what happened, stood by him and supported him through the entire thing, the entire trial. They said, quote, we're praying for you, honey. You have your entire family praying. Fidel originally pled not guilty. His lawyers were trying to get his confession not able to be used in court under the most ridiculous excuse that I've ever heard in my life of him not being able to understand the English language when he was literally speaking English the entire time he confessed. But then in 2017, to avoid getting the death penalty, he changed his plea to guilty, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And in the courtroom, he said something to Maria's family. He said, quote, today I am happy to fulfill this conviction. I know that what I did has to be paid, and I agree. I will pay with my life for the life that I took. To Maria's family, I ask for forgiveness. Maria's family was absolutely heartbroken and devastated, of course. Her cousin said, quote, I still cannot. I can't process it. Maria was very responsible. It's very hard to understand why she got involved with a person who has these kind of thoughts. Her cousin also described Maria to be a beautiful young woman who was full of life and very close to her family. This is a quote from Maria's father as well. He said, quote, if I had to summarize the life of Maria, it would be very difficult to express it in a few lines. I just want to tell you all that she was and will continue to be a model of affection, effort, perseverance, and love of humanity, end quote. But that is all I have for today's story. There's not a word in any language that is terrible enough to describe just how awful of a human being you have to be able to have it in you to do that to someone else. I cannot comprehend. But anyway, hope you guys are having the best day. If not, go do something to make it the best day. Make somebody happy, and I will see you in my next video. Massive kiss on the forehead to every single one of you.